So let's talk about how scientists study the interior of the Earth. One of the things that scientists rely heavily on to understand what's going on very deep in the Earth is the behavior of seismic waves. When seismic waves pass through the deep Earth, their behavior actually changes in accordance to the types of material that they're passing through. So the different types of material can be influenced by the temperature, the state, whether that material is in a solid or a liquid, and the density of the material. And all of these different factors will have an impact on how the seismic waves pass through the Earth. So seismology is not just applied to earthquakes, but is most often applied to understanding what's happening deep inside the Earth. So anywhere where we have a boundary between two different types of material deep in the Earth, that's what we call a seismic discontinuity. Because what's going to happen there is that the seismic waves are going to change their behavior as the wave passes from one material to another. Oftentimes, that wave might not necessarily pass from one material to another. For example, S waves, as we see here in the red arrows, can't pass through liquid. The outer core of the Earth, as we know, is in a liquid state. So the S waves actually get absorbed by the outer core. They don't pass through. S waves are capable of going around the outer core, but they can't pass through it. P waves, on the other hand, do pass through the outer core, but they get bent substantially in the process. So you can see that P waves are coming in, and the angle at which they meet the outer core changes. And that happens again when they meet the solid inner core. So as scientists take this information from seismographic stations all over the world and process it, we're able to get a deeper understanding of what's happening far within the center of the Earth. So as seismic waves meet a discontinuity or a boundary, there's three things that can occur, as I alluded to in the previous slide. They can be refracted or bent, they can be reflected or bounced away, or they can be absorbed, and the waves will not pass through that material, but they'll just get absorbed by it. Now, there are other ways that allow scientists to look deep into the Earth. Seismic tomatography is what we were just talking about in terms of giving scientists the ability to sort of make slices of the Earth and understand what's happening at various different depths. We can make direct observations of the Earth, however, that gets challenging because the Earth is very vast and our ability to drill into it is actually very limited. But we can also rely on xenoliths, and xenoliths are bits of the deep mantle that are brought closer to the surface through volcanic activity. So if we can isolate and find xenoliths, we can actually study them to get a better understanding of what's happening deep in the Earth. And then there's indirect observation, things like magnetism and density. We have satellites that can identify for us the density of the Earth regionally, and that correlates very nicely to the materials deep in the Earth. And also, because the center of the Earth is iron and nickel, and the iron is magnetic, we can use the magnetic field of the Earth to understand a little bit about what's going on deep inside of it. Let's switch gears slightly and talk about diamonds, because diamonds are really pretty fascinating, but diamonds have their origin very deep in the center of the Earth. Essentially, we know that diamonds are pure carbon. So what happens is that carbon is coming from the surface. We don't have any source of carbon deep in the Earth, so that carbon must have come from the surface at some point. The current thinking for how diamonds form is that long ago there was a subduction zone. The sea floor is very rich with carbon. We have carbonate rocks there, limestones. We've got calcareous ooze that generates on the seafloor from the decay of single-celled marine animals. And we also have organic material that builds up on the seafloor. So that organic material, that carbon, is carried into subduction zones with the sea crust and with the rocks, and it's taken to depth, very, very, very deep, where the temperature and pressure is so high that we actually get the formation of diamonds. Now the hard part is getting those diamonds back to the surface. Diamonds generally form in a mineral called kimberlite. Kimberlite is an igneous mineral that forms when you have very specific conditions. If the conditions are too hot, the pressure is too high, the kimberlite doesn't form right and the diamonds will actually vaporize. So it's actually very rare to get diamonds at the surface because the conditions under which they need to be created and brought to the surface are very, very specific. So essentially what happens with diamonds is we get subduction. That organic material is taken deep into the mantle, it's compressed, the diamonds form, and then those diamonds come back to the surface in the form of a kimberlite pipe, as we see in the in the graphic to the right here. And these kimberlite pipes are oftentimes very deep. We saw in an earlier set of lectures about diamond mining in the Canadian Arctic, and that diamond mine that was on that photograph was actually a lake, and the lake had formed in the kimberlite pipe because the kimberlite was a softer material than what was around it, so it had eroded away and filled with water. So they actually had to drain the lake to create the diamond mine. So diamonds, while not necessarily as rare as their price may dictate, because diamonds are controlled by an international monopoly, they are pretty geologically rare because they do form under some very specific geologic conditions.